Hello, everyone. So happy to be here with you today in the first live of this year, The Impact. I wanted to switch to English because so many of my friends who are not, who unfortunately don't speak French, have asked me to actually start doing lives in English. So I'm going to be switching from French to English. But of course, I will not forget my French speaking friends, and I will definitely be doing some lives in French in the future. So for this first live of the year, I initially planned it last week, but the emotions were high. For those of you who watched the AFCON, they know that Morocco lost in the finals, and so it wasn't easy for all of us to cope up with the emotions, and that made me think of something very important that is also related to brands and businesses, is that we need to talk about emotions and how emotions impact our everyday decisions, even as professionals, even as business owners or business decision makers, be it or brand decision makers. So basically, one of the truths that people usually have really a lot of difficulty accepting is that what actually feels or looks good sometimes is mainly emotions. So what feels obvious, what feels the right thing, is usually emotions and not facts. So when we are, or when we lose as people, we are in a state of high emotions, usually negative emotions, and these emotions stop our thinking, and we start making up stories, stories that will make us feel more comfortable, stories that will make us feel let's say better, stories that will make us feel right. And this doesn't only happen when we are losing, it also happens when we are winning. So when we are winning, for example, what we tend to do is to make up stories where we overestimate our, let's say, our uh, participation or our role in the success. Where it happens like when we succeed in an exam, or it happens when we do a good transition or transaction, commercial transaction. We usually tend to actually overestimate our goal, what we did, instead of looking at the reality, looking at what happened. So, as I said, both negative and positive emotions push us to create stories that make us feel good, that make us feel right. But feeling right is not always the right thing. It's not because we feel right or we feel good about something that it is the right thing to be or the right thing to have. And let's please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that emotions are bad. Emotions are here for reasons. Emotions are here to help us act fast, react fast. They help us survive. But once we pass that moment of emotions, we need to go back and check back the reality. We need to not let emotions create false stories, bad stories that usually change the reality, or doesn't give us the clear or the right image, or the reality about what's happening in our lives. And this is not an exception for brands and businesses. It happens a lot. And as I work with a lot of brands, a lot of decision makers, I can tell you, I see how emotions impact the people behind the businesses, and how emotions impact the people behind the brands. So let's take in case of a brand that made a launch and it didn't work. What I hear, usually there are accusations between the sales team versus the marketing team versus the communication team versus the leadership versus the finance. When you hear the different stakeholders, you will hear different stories, because emotions are high. No one wants to accept that they failed. No one wants to accept or admit their responsibility or partial responsibility in the failure. So they tend to accuse the others. Sales would say, the marketing didn't identify the right tension. They didn't pull enough clients. Marketing would be like the product was not distributed correctly. It wasn't in the right places. There were a lot of out of stocks. Communication would be like, would be accusing communication, would be accusing consumers sometimes that didn't understand the message, that they didn't get, what the campaign was about. So basically, and if you take a look at all this, what you will notice, sorry, excuse me, just a problem with my connection. I think, yes, it's working well. So I've been having internet issues this morning, so I hope you're getting my lives directly correctly. So yeah, I was saying what happens if we look at all these stories. If we look at what I've told you, sales accusing marketing, marketing accusing communication, all sales, and vice versa. We see that there is always someone else. We're always accusing exterior. We're always accusing someone else or something else, circumstances, instead of stopping, do a self-check and see what we did right and what we did wrong, and check with the market, check with the consumer, for example, to understand what didn't work. So, and this is just survival mode of a human being, and it actually impacts how we act even in the professional world, in the business world. So basically, when we fail, we make up a story that makes us feel good. As long as it's not us, we're fine. But what is even worse sometimes, and believe me, at least when we fail, what we do is that, yes, we make up stories for a little moment or for a while, and then we come back to reality, and sometimes we say, let's understand why we lost, why we didn't do as what was planned. And then probably we would call for a market research agency. We would start doing some research among the consumers, see what happened. We would triangle the different sources of data, our internal data, the panel data, the consumer data, and we look at, if what didn't work actually, and we come up with let's say a roadmap for the next launch, or how we can improve our product, improve our go-to-market strategy, or how we can improve our campaign, whatever it is we identified as a problem, or sometimes even it's several problems at the same time. So at least when we lose, once the emotions are low, once that initial reaction, emotional reaction is over, we go back and we try. For some of us, or many of the businesses and brands that I've worked with, some don't even bother. They would make up a story, they would imagine a scenario, and they would say, this is why it didn't work. That's it. Next time we won't do that. And they would do another mistake, or they would continue doing the mistakes they used to do. What is dangerous sometimes, and what's even more dangerous, let's say, is that sometimes we overestimate and we make up stories about why we win. Because usually when we win, we are happy, everything is going well, our sales are very high, the brand is doing well. So basically, we don't need to understand why we're winning. We overestimate our role. We have a good strategy, our campaign is just splendid, extraordinary. Our distribution is working very well. Everything is good. So no need to check why we're winning. We are fine. But sometimes things don't work as we expect. I have an example here with clients we've worked with a while ago. It was a detergent brand. So this was a new detergent brand that launched in the market, quite new, for a while, let's say for 2 years, and they were doing very well. Then all of a sudden, the growth started slowing. They were still growing, but it started slowing down, and they didn't understood why. So we came to them, and we asked them, of course, to provide us with some data. We asked them to provide us with their internal sales data, to provide us with their retail data, the consumer panel data, the consumer research data. Well, basically, they didn't buy any of those, because for them, as long as they were doing well, they didn't need to check, they didn't know to understand how they were winning. So what we did, actually, we got all this data that we've requested, and we triangled the different data. So what we identified, they were doing very well, they were growing because they were doing very well in penetration. They were steadily growing, penetrating new households. But the issue was with the frequency of purchase. The buyers of their brands had a less frequency than the rest of the market. Buyers who buy their product or their brand had less frequency. They would buy the product, the brand, less frequently than the rest of the market, than the competition. Let's say their brand is A, and there are B, C, D, E. So B, C, D, E, people would buy them once a month. For them, they would buy them once every 50 days or 40 days or whatever, just to give you an example. So this was the reality. They were penetrating, but frequency was lower, which means the growth was coming only from penetration, while the users were buying them less volume per household in a year. Households were buying them less in volume than the other brands. But they were happy because they were growing. They never asked what's happening. So we went and tried to understand why consumers of this specific brand would buy them less frequently than the rest of the market. And so when we went and talked to the consumers, and it didn't take us long before understanding what was happening. Basically, the product, so before getting to this point, when they were winning, you know what the stories they were making? We are the leaders. We have the best product. The consumers love our products, so they're buying us more and more, and that's why we're winning. So we went back to the consumers, as I said, which tried to understand what's going on. So what happened is, actually, when the consumer tried the brand, it had a lot of foam. So it was very hard for them to rinse it. It took much more water to rinse the product, their brand, than it does with other brands. So what did the consumer did? Consumers are smart. Of course, they didn't drop. Some of them did, but most of them reduced the quantity used. So instead of them, let's say, needing a pack per month, they only needed a pack per 40 days or 50 days. So they wouldn't buy frequently the brand. Here the brand was happy, thinking that they were doing well, but what they were actually doing is shooting themselves in the feet. They were, instead of, they were penetrating very well, but they were installing a new way or a new habit in the consumers' households. So people would buy them, use less quantity. They buy the same pack, same price as a brand, a competition brand, but they would be using less quantity. So they were saving like 1 pack or 2 packs per year. And when you do that in so many households, you imagine what they were actually losing without even noticing it. When you say this imagine when you tell this little simple story, reality, fact, insight to the board, how did they feel? They have spent 1.5 years, 2 years thinking they were leading, thinking consumers bought them because they had, they were succeeding because they had the best product. It was actually not the best product in the market, but the consumer was able to adapt. So of course, what they did, they reviewed their formula. But reviewing a formula at this stage might be a problem also, because it's too late. Because consumer got used to using your product a little quality, smaller quantity of your product. That's why it's very, very important to make sure that even when we launch, when we succeed, we check why we are succeeding. We don't only, excuse me, we don't stop at looking at our internal data. We don't stop at looking at our sales. Yeah, we're doing very well. Maybe we are doing very well, not because our product is the best, because of something different in the market. Sometimes, and this happens also with a lot of clients, they think they're doing very well, their sales are growing, but they forget that the category is growing even faster, which means they're not doing well actually. But they don't know. They never checked. They never looked at the data outside of themselves. They've never stopped and said, are we performing at our full potential? Maybe not. Maybe we are not. But they don't know. They have never actually stopped to look at what works and what doesn't work. Honestly, I feel so good when I receive a brief from a client who asks me, we launched product X and it's successful. We want to know why. Because this is the moment where identify the elements that make a success of your brand. So if you do that, you get learning, and you use that learning for the future, so that in the future launch, you make sure that you're doing the same, maybe not exactly the same thing, but you are activating and leveraging the elements of success so that you have higher chances of succeeding in the market, instead of making up stories about why you succeeded. And then, maybe in the next launch, when you launch another product, you apply the same plan and it won't work. Let's say if for this company, they've launched another detergent in a different format. So the first format was a liquid, the second one would be powder or pods. Let's imagine they've launched the powder, and with more or less the same way of thinking, that it needs this quantity of foam, and didn't work in a pod because the consumer cannot cut it. It's just an example, it's just imagine that sometimes by making up stories, we end up pushing ourselves to lose, to make a loss, instead of winning, instead of us taking time to review what we did, be it we lost or we won. We need to stop. Yes, emotions are good. Yes, emotions makes us feel good, but insights are even stronger. We need to know how to say stop to our emotions. This is a story. This is a hypothesis. Let me check it. Yes, maybe I won because my product is the leading in the market, but I can only know that if I check. I need to stop and go check. What usually also happens is that when for example, I'm presenting with my team in the board, and we tell them something they didn't want to hear. Like we tell them, you lost because basically the client doesn't, or you're losing because client think that your formula is not good. You know what sometimes I hear from, be it the research and development, be it, someone who's responsible for, developing the formula, but the consumer doesn't know. Our product in the lab is the best. In paper is the best. This is something that I hear so many times. Believe me, I'm in market research for so many years, And this is something I hear so many times. People don't want to accept the reality. They don't want to accept that actually they can be wrong. Maybe the consumers do not have, let's say, the same perceptions of your product. Let's accept it. And you know what happens is that no, consumer doesn't know. This is the best. We're using the best ingredients. Okay, fine. It is your reality. But when you go to the market, it's the consumer's reality and perceptions that will define if you're going to win or lose. You need to listen to your consumers. If the consumer says, I don't like it, he's not going to buy it. You're not going to make him believe that it is good. You can't. You need to adapt your formula to what the client is expecting. So let's control our emotions and let's listen to the market. And you know what I usually do? Because it's very hard for them to hear it direct from us. I make them hear it directly from the consumer. It's either by taking them out, organizing a field visit where we would go and sit with the consumer, and the consumer will tell them in his own words how unhappy they are about the product. Or we would take videos and put them in the report so that they see or they hear for themselves what consumers are really, what they have to say about their product. Because it's not easy, we actually let the emotion, myself, I'm part of the people, and I'm telling you, last week I was in very high emotions. It took me 2-3 days to calm down, but once we are down, we need to go back and ask ourselves, are the stories we made real stories, or are just real facts inside, or are they just stories that we have made to feel good, to feel better about ourselves? So if you have a product, or if you have a campaign that you want to launch, you want to make sure that you want to test it. You want to make sure that you won't let your emotions take over and make you believe stories created to make you feel good. What feels good is not usually what is good. What feels right is not usually what is right. So make sure that you're going to pre-test your campaign, for example. So for that, we have tools that can help you pre-test your campaign or your advertisement in 15 minutes. We can help you do that. Or we can help you also post-launch, in case you have launched it and then you're not sure what worked, what didn't work, which media worked, which media didn't work. So we can help you post-launch it. We have protocols to post-launch to identify which media had impacted most your performance. For products, you can do product testing. If in case your brand is well distributed and you're still, not growing enough, maybe it's a good time to ask yourself, is my product formula the right one? Am I performing at pair, or at least at pair or even better than competition? Did I test my pricing? How is my brand equity? How is my awareness? So all these questions that you should be asking yourself, we can answer them with market research. At Integrate, we can help you actually identify what works, what doesn't work. We can help you avoid catastrophes. And we've seen so many of them. Millions and millions and millions spent on a product that didn't work, or in a campaign that no one remembers. So you don't want to be one of those who fail. You want to be successful. You want to have a business that grows. You want to have a brand that grows. And to do that, you need to let the emotions aside. You need to let the stories aside. It's not all the stories we tell ourselves are the right stories. Not all the stories we tell ourselves are the good stories. Let the stories aside and let's check the data, check the facts. Sometimes the data is already there. Sometimes we just need to, triangle the data. But sometimes we still need to go and check with the consumer himself. Because at the end of the day, it's the consumer who buys your product on your brand. If they don't like it, if they don't have a good perception, it doesn't matter if you think your product is the best in the market. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're using the most expensive raw material, or you have the right formula. You think you have the right formula. If it's not the right formula for the client, for the consumer, it is not the right formula. Stop. Because you're not producing, you are not creating products for yourself. You are creating them for your market. And for you to create the right ones, you need to understand that market. You need to understand if the product is working for them. You need to understand if the formula is the right one for your target market. It doesn't have to be the right one for you. You don't ask the people around you if the formula works. You ask the market, you ask the consumer. And we can help you with that. So, as I said, remember one thing. Emotions are not bad. They are good because they help us survive. They help us cope up with, very high tensions. But let's not let them create stories for us that we don't check. Okay, it's good to create a story to feel better. We need to live that emotion, but we need to check that story. Is the story we are making the right one? Is it helping us, or is it working against us? And I'm not talking only here about us as people, but even us as professionals, handling brands, handling businesses. Do we let our emotions take over and push us make decisions without checking? Do we launch products and campaigns because we think they are good? And when they fail, we make up stories about problems outside of ourselves? Stop. Take the time to check. And as I said, at Integrate, we are here to help you do that. If you want to know more, you can contact me on LinkedIn, or you can send me an email. We will be very happy to let you know how we can help you succeed even more. Thank you very much for being with me here today. I hope it was insightful for you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you very soon.